the Vice Lords, warriors of the streets, by ℌ𝔞𝔫𝔦𝣣.
That's bad, man. That is bad. It ain't never done. That's been never done on a record before. That's bad, brother. That is bad. Believe me. Believe me. That's bad. Believe me.
Came for the way my DJ cut it. DJ cut it. DJ cut it.
We interrupt our program to bring you
Chapter 2, Features of the Vice Lord Social System. When the Vice Lords discuss their club, references are often made to particular features. Certain of these figured in the previous outline of Vice Lord development, and all are important to the discussions in later chapters. Here, our concern is to introduce and briefly describe these features so that the arguments in later chapters can be followed. Branches. The Vice Lord nation is divided into branches. Each branch has its own particular name, set of officers, and territory. At the time of my first period of field work, Vice Lords said that the following branches existed: the Albany Lords, the California Lords, the Fifth Avenue Lords, the Lake Street Lords, the Lexington Lords, the Madison Lords, the Maniac Lords, the City Lords, that is, those from Vice Lord City, and the Warlords. However, I cannot verify that all of these branches actually exist, for not every individual could name every branch, and leaders could not always be designated for the branches named. The Vice Lords who gave me information were from Vice Lord City, the Albany Lords, and the Monroe Lords. In addition, I met Vice Lords from the Maniac Lords, the Sacramento Lords, and the Warlords. This indicates that the club is divided into at least 6 branches. Everyone I talked with agreed that the City Lords is the original branch. It is the largest and probably the most powerful subgroup in the Vice Lord nation. The Vice Lord Social Center was located in Vice Lord City, the territory of the City Lords. Before it closed for lack of funds, the center was a meeting place for all the Vice Lords in the nation. Vice Lords that each branch, while autonomous, generally acknowledges the seniority of the City Lords. Prior to the latest change in organization, the leaders of the city called the infrequent meetings of the entire nation, decided what was going to be discussed, and ran the actual meeting. The members of the city were in charge of maintaining order. Although some branches may have been feuding, no fighting was allowed during these meetings. The number of branches is not constant. Old branches break up and new ones are formed. One of the ways branches are formed is through alliance and subsequent absorption. The formation of the Monroe Lords provides a good example of this process. A club known as the Ambassadors started fighting a club called the Imperial Burpees. The Ambassadors lost fight after fight and finally agreed to become part of the Burpees. When the Vice Lords contacted the leaders of the Ambassadors and agreed to help them if the fight with the Burpees was renewed, the Ambassadors withdrew from the Burpees and the two groups again began fighting. With the help of the Vice Lords, the Ambassadors won this war and broke up the Burpees. The Ambassadors and the remnants of the Burpees became the Monroe Lords. In other instances, branches are formed when groups of boys decide to start a Vice Lord branch in their own neighborhood. After hanging with the Lords on 16th and Lawndale, the capital of Vice Lord City, and proving themselves to be regular fellas, the leaders of the City Lords allow them to set up their own branch and use the Vice Lord name. Toward the end of my field work, I witnessed the formation of a branch by this process. Some of the boys living in a neighborhood that was part of the North Side ghetto were jumped on by a group of older boys who lived several blocks away. The younger boys reacted to this in the standard ghetto way. They formed a club for mutual protection. Some of these boys were friendly with a woman in the neighborhood who offered them the use of her basement for their club meetings. This woman was a good friend of several vice lords, and one afternoon they decided to visit her. She suggested to one of them that he talk to this group about becoming a branch of the vice lords. When this individual showed the boys his vice lord membership card and described how powerful the lords were, they decided to try to become a part of the club. That weekend, these boys sponsored a dance, and several vice lords from the west side came to help in case enemies of the group might try to break it up. I was told that later the boys would be taken to the west side to meet other leaders of the vice lords, and after a short time would probably be accepted as vice lords by the leaders of the city. Finally, new branches are formed as a result of the high rate of spatial mobility found in the ghetto. As members of various branches move out of a neighborhood, they often start new branches in their new neighborhoods. Since they are already known as vice lords, it is not necessary for them to prove themselves further. According to various vice lords, branches are often connected by ties of alliance which became activated during interbranch conflicts. These alliances are based on individual friendships. Particular alliances often stem from the maintenance of friendship ties between members who move away and join or found new branches and those who remain. When a conflict develops between two branches, others are drawn in through the operation of ties based on friendship. An example is provided by a feud between the Maypole and Monroe lords. A Monroe lord gives the following account of the early phases of this feud.
This was one of them come and go fights. We strike and they strike. They were coming over in our neighborhood and jumping on little boys and taking their money. Now we kept a strong neighborhood. We didn't do this, and we didn't allow it to go on. And the little kids looked up to us. They knew we were real bad, but they still thought we were nice. So one day, one of the Maypole lords came across Garfield Park and took some money from Jesse's little brother. Jesse, he was one of the heavy Monroe lords. We had to do something. We had told them not to come over robbing anybody. So we caught them in this little restaurant one night, unaware. And that's when the fighting broke out. We had quite a little humbug.
Fights between the Monroe and Maypole lords continued, and other branches became involved. The Madison and California lords supported the Monroe lords, while the city lords were allied with the Maypole branch. The following account by a member of the city lords illustrates the principle of reciprocal friendship on which alliances between branches are based. The Maypole lords, we dug them, but we didn't like the Monroe because they was kind of funny. They was kind of bourgeois. They would give sets and stuff and wouldn't let the city and Maypole know about it. We would find out afterwards. So why didn't they tell us? Then they go around talking about us. They said, well, we don't want them fools out here. They didn't want Tankson and them from Maypole around because they was some stone fools. As far as I was concerned, they was real mellow, but Monroe didn't dig them. And then we got the idea that Monroe was just using our name to keep other people off them. And when Monroe started fighting the Maypole lords, well, quite naturally, we gonna come up into it. Cave was out then, and Cave more than likely would take the Maypole side. Monroe didn't dig this. See, Maypole They was our boys. That stud Tankson, the president, he was a mellow stud. They were out of sight, and we dug them. While branches may engage in feuds, they unite when threatened by an enemy club. The Monroe and the Maypole lords united against the racketeers even while their feud was in progress. Now, while this was going on, the feud between the Monroe and the Maypole branches, the racketeers was steady coming over. They were throwing gas bombs, and they had got pretty good at it. But we united with the Maypole lords and trapped them over in Douglas Park, which they weren't expecting. They had done wrong, and they know they had done wrong. Before they knew it, we were on them. This was both us and the Maypole lords. It was about 2 days after we had got the Maypole lords in the restaurant, but the fight between us was still going on. We were still mad at them, and they were still mad because we had beat up a lot of them and tore up their hangout. In feuds between branches, vice lords state that fighting should be limited to fists, although other weapons are sometimes used in wars between clubs. In contrast, there are no limitations set on the legitimate use of weapons.